Okay, I'm taping today's lesson because it's very confusing. There's a lot of aspects to the levels of court. As we said, Supreme Court's the highest court in the land, but there's a million other courts that lead up to Supreme Court. It gets confusing. This is why I gave you a packet with my notes in it. I'm going to have you throughout underline, highlight, write things in the margins. I'm also going to come up with my own vocabulary list of words that or terms that you absolutely need to know. We've already talked about what you know about the court system. My huge objective today is that you not only can explain what the Constitution says about the judiciary, but also the structure of our judicial system, which is incredibly complex. I talked about the homework. If you are confused about anything I say, you can go back and listen, or you can go to chapter 18, sections 1, 2, and 4. That's what we're going over today. A ton of stuff. So, let's get started. There's some very important main ideas, thesis statements, if you will, of this section. First, framers of the Constitution believed we need courts. We're humans, none of us are the best, we need laws. Whether or not you agree with that, by the way, if you're an anarchist, you don't believe that we need laws, like that. But the Constitution, in Article 3, sets out a structure for the federal judiciary, the judicial or the jurisdiction of the courts, and the function of federal judges. What is jurisdiction? I want you to underline this word. What is jurisdiction? Think Law and Order or cop shows. Yeah.
Where people have power.
Yes, very good. Where people have power. Put a line, put where people have power. Very good. Any court that is not the Supreme Court is called the inferior courts. Any court that's not the Supreme Court is the inferior courts. Think here, original jurisdiction, underline. Original jurisdiction, what do you guess that would mean? Original.
What was jurisdiction?
Emma.
It's the first time it's been tried.
First time it's been tried. Very good. So original jurisdiction, the first time it's been tried. And appeal, the second, the third time it's been tried. As well as criminal and civil cases. What would a criminal case be? What would a criminal, Melody? Doing something criminal, yeah. Criminal involves breaking the law. Civil involves, what would civil be? Yeah. So, disputes that are not breaking the law. Like divorce, land disputes, that kind of stuff. Hey, what's up? What desk would it be on? Okay, and then there's also special courts. Congress has created these special courts. Each court has very narrow jurisdiction. So they are in charge of something very small.
And I always just start by saying I ordered a dog and they gave me a long one hour. Like, were they breaking the law? Like, would that be a civil or?
Well, let's say they wouldn't
Like
give you the right one. They'll talk up here. That'd probably be a civil, unless they were like, you know, swear word, and then threw the cock and punched you in the nose. Stomped on your foot. Then that would be criminal. Kenzie, I love you. You're fantastic. I would pretend I didn't know you. Okay, the framers of the Constitution laid all this out in Article 3. Article 2 is about what? Or who? President. Very good. Article 1 is about legislative branch. Very good. There are two court systems in the U.S. One is a national court system that spans the whole country. And then there's courts run by each state. So there are state courts and there are federal courts. if you look in your packet, I gave you two tables on what kind of cases are heard in the federal court and what kind of cases are heard in the state court. The Constitution creates the Supreme Court and left Congress to make up everything else. So there's two types of courts: constitutional courts and special courts. Remember, special courts hear very specific cases. And there's a whole section on special courts, but I just boiled it down to a page because I'm not focusing my unit on the little tiny little details on the special courts. I want to focus the unit on what is the basics of the judicial branch and how does it affect you. Constitutional courts where people would go if they believe their rights are being violated. So on top of everything, we have the United States Supreme Court. Then we have constitutional courts. The way those work are there's 94 district courts. Some states only have one district court, but every state it has to have at least one. And then some have 4, like Texas and California. And then there's 12 U.S. Court of Appeals. So if you want to appeal the way that this ended, you would go to a court of appeals. Then there's a federal circuit of appeals. A lot of these cases, the special courts would go to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the federal circuit. And then there's the U.S. Court of International Trade, which is under a constitutional court, but it's kind of more of a special court. More.
If you appeal a case, does it go to a new judge?
Yes.
The courts being very close to what we're looking at right now, which categories are fall under the national judiciary or are they all the same?
They're mixed. Most of these federal courts, excuse me.
Except for the 94.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wait, if you could be tried twice for the same thing, how would they appeal?
Great point. So, for example, let's say I'm being tried in a criminal case. A lot of the cases that are, again, being tried in a criminal case for the death of Trayvon Martin, say, so George Zimmerman. If I get off, but if George Zimmerman's family does not like the verdict, they can appeal, but they can only appeal into a civil case. So it was criminal. Now they have to look at the issue differently, and they have to appeal the case, and they have to appeal it being a civil case. Do you understand? I'm impressed you understand because I'm confusing myself. But it was a criminal case. Now they have to looking at the case in a different lens. Or they have to appeal saying that there's racism going on here. Like there's something that we haven't really looked at. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be double jeopardy?
If you don't look at it in a different way and appeal in a different way, yes, it is very good. Yeah.
You say it was Zimmerman's family didn't like the outcome?
Or Trayvon Martin.
So,
I should have said Trayvon Martin.
okay, gotcha.
It's a really, really good question. Jurisdiction is defined as the authority of a court to hear and decide a case. Now, there's different definitions for police. The police have jurisdiction to investigate a case. Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution provides that a federal court may hear a case. So you wouldn't go to a district court, you would jump straight to a federal court if you have a specific subject matter, like treason. So Edward Snowden would go straight to a federal court because he committed treason. He betrayed his country. Postal crime. If you commit a crime on specific federal land. So, for example, you're going to do a robbery, don't do it on a naval base or an Air Force base because you'll jump straight to federal courts. It's serious business. If you did it on regular state land, you'd be tried by the state, and it's smaller sentences.
Yeah. So like the shooting at the Navy base went straight to federal.
Correct. Very good. Yeah. Or the parties involved in the case. If you're someone who is really important, or you're an ambassador. Imagine if the ambassador from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan got in trouble in the U.S. and got, the death sentence from one of the courts. Think about how angry that country would be at us. So those cases go immediately to federal courts because they're kind of testy cases. Some go immediately to the Supreme Court. These are important. These are little vocabulary words that you're going to need to know. Exclusive jurisdiction. Remember, jurisdiction is the right to hear a case. Exclusive jurisdiction is really easy to remember because it's exclusively given to the federal government. So federal exclusive jurisdictions, cases that can be only heard by the federal courts. Concurrent jurisdictions, cases that can be tried either the federal or the state courts. If you look at your chart, your first chart on the back of your notes, it'll say state courts. And what cases have jurisdiction in state courts, what court cases have jurisdiction in federal courts, and what courts have jurisdiction in both, or concurrent jurisdiction. Right above state or federal courts, put concurrent. That means both. Concurrent. A court in which a case is first heard is known as original jurisdiction. A court that hears a case on appeal, or the second or third time, that's appeals, has appellate jurisdiction. So if you hear the court case over and over again, that's appeal, that's appellate jurisdiction. If you hear the case for the first time, you have original jurisdiction. Supreme Court has both appellate and original jurisdiction. A lot of cases are appealed up to the Supreme Court, so they have appellate jurisdiction, but some cases can only be heard by the Supreme Court. So if the president gets in trouble, his case goes straight to the Supreme Court. I say he, because until you all grow up, we don't have a woman president yet. Supreme Court can say no to hearing some court cases. So who has heard of the court case Roe v. Wade? Roe v. Wade. Kelsey.
Actually,
How about?
it has to do with abortion.
Yeah, it has to do with abortion. What does it say about abortion? Does anyone know? That women have a right to have an abortion. So every year, there's court cases from pro-life groups that go up to the Supreme Court, and they're trying to be heard by the Supreme Court. So they hope the Supreme Court would overturn Roe v. Wade. But the Supreme Court has never taken a case. So the Supreme Court can choose what court cases they take and what court cases they do not take. In April, the court has decided that they are going to hear a gay marriage case. So as soon as late April, it's possible that the Supreme Court will decide that banning gay marriages is unconstitutional, and gay marriage will be allowed throughout the United States. Yeah.
Do you think when they accept those cases, they already have what they're gonna vote? Like they already are like, oh, gay's wrong, gay's right. Like they already.
Possibly. They're not supposed to, but they possibly do. I mean, each judge has their own bias and their own reading of the U.S. Constitution. Morgan, and then
I'm a little confused by the gay marriage law because this girl at my mom's work, her daughter and her fiance are going to get married, but that's not illegal. It's just not seen that they're married.
right,
Like in the law.
right. So they can have a ceremony.
But only they would know that they're technically married.
Right.
So they wouldn't be technically married.
It would be a symbol to them that.
The biggest problem is they don't get like you know how your husband if he dies you have
Oh, yeah.
all the insurance.
We wouldn't get that.
If this case does like passed or whatever, where you can be seen with, I don't know how to say it, but like with the people who are already married, would they have to get remarried?
Yes.
They would have to get remarried.
Yes. Yeah. Unless you live in a state that already recognizes marriage. But otherwise, yeah.
So, like, if my mom and dad got divorced, but then my dad died like a year later, would my mom not get any benefits?
Depends how he has his will.
And then the other question was, so the Roe v. Wade, was that determined like in an inferior court? And so the
Supreme Court.
Supreme
It started in an inferior court and worked its way up to a Supreme Court.
Oh. I'm sorry, could you just
Really good question.
talk about the
Yeah. Appeals court. So if Taylor and I go to trial because Taylor sued me over a grade, and I win. Sorry, Taylor. Taylor still doesn't like it. She can appeal the court case to an appellate court. Appellate court only hears cases that have already been heard. Yeah.
Okay, so I understand like an appeal is kind of like going in, I guess, for like a second shot, kind of, but like, okay, so my cousin has been in court and stuff right now for, I don't know, have you lived here? Okay, sorry, I just didn't
No,
know.
it's fine.
Like, last year something, did you hear about like a house that got burned down, like a meth lab or whatever?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, well, that but he went to court. They've been going to court for a while, and the judge they've been having so many different court cases and been saying like this is the day that this is his final decision. And then once they get there, he files like an appeal or whatever, and they have another court, and then I think they've appealed like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, you can appeal it a lot.
Like, why though?
Eventually, you run out of appeals. So eventually you work your way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would say, I'll take your case or I won't. And if they don't, the last judgment stands. And if they do, their judgment stands.
Well, I think he finally confessed or whatever, but I think
they can appeal and appeal and appeal. Yeah. Whatever. It's a long process. It makes it really confusing. In some certain cases, in special courts, you can only appeal so many times. But most of the regular courts can appeal and appeal and appeal.
Can they deny an appeal?
Only Supreme Court. So yeah.
So can they appeal it before the judge makes the final decision?
No, they have to wait till the judge makes the final decision.
But isn't that double jeopardy?
In some cases, they have to switch what the defendant is being on trial for. It's on trial for. So George Zimmerman, if he went on trial again, he would be it wouldn't be a criminal case, it would be a civil case or a civil rights case. But yeah, that's a really good point. It's like little loopholes around it. But the idea is, if you go all the way up through the system, and then all the appeals are over, and then you try to put the same person on trial again after all the appeals and everything, that would be double jeopardy.
Since if you appeal a case and then it goes to the civil courts, since civil courts is usually suing and stuff like that, smaller cases,
Yeah.
does that mean that you would get a smaller sentence?
Yeah.
So I would just appeal until I get the smaller sentence.
Well, the problem with appealing is they could give you a larger sentence. And you have to pay for your...
you're just doing it to try and get out of it.
Or the next judge, the first judge was kind of lenient and thought, okay, I'll just get for this. The next judge is a big meanie and is like, I'm going to throw the book at this person. So you don't quite know how it's going to work. The big point of this next slide is the president approves, or the president appoints a judge, Congress approves the judge. President appoints federal judges, but they're not Supreme Court judges until Congress approves them. So next to this slide, please put President appoints, Congress approves. answers of President Obama's two choices for the Supreme Court. This is a huge, huge power the president has. Because these two justices will be on the court until they want to retire. So here's Justice Sotomayor, who's the first Hispanic and third female justice, and Justice Elena Kagan.
Aren't there rumors that she's dead?
Yeah, there's rumors. I don't know. I don't think she's come out with it. Okay. All this slide talks about federal judicial district courts. This whole slide talks about district courts. There's 94 district courts. So we have one in every state, but the larger states get more than one district court. Kentucky has 2. So district courts are the first place you're going to go for most trials. So they have original jurisdiction. Original jurisdiction the first time the case is tried. They hear a wide range of criminal and civil cases. We talked about criminal cases being breaking of federal law, and civil cases are non-criminal matters like divorce or land disputes. Yeah.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Last year I was on team board, and I don't know if I have this or not, but if we try somebody and they don't do what sentence we give them, they say that they have to go to like circuit court or district court.
Right.
After that, would they have to change what they're being
Charged with.
since we only give them a sentence, we don't say if they did it or not. Like they've already like confessed.
I would say yes. The original charge would be they confess to doing this, and then
Would they be charged
And
with
then-
not doing?
exactly. Yeah. Violated their court pretty much. Criminal, anything criminal. Civil, anything non-criminal. Court of Appeals was handled in 1891 because everything was going straight to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court couldn't handle it. So we created a Court of Appeals. There's 12 courts around the country. The map that I have on the next slide just shows 11. I'll show you where the 12th one is. And then, what is going on? Yeah, no. There's 179 circuit judges, and they only have appellate jurisdiction, hearing cases that have already been heard once or twice, or how many times the person is appealing. Here are the district courts. I think the last one is up right over here. But it would make sense to have, well, I think it's right here. I'm not sure about that. So you can also see the district courts here. So in California, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. In Texas, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 district courts. Alabama, 3, 3. Kentucky, 2 district courts. Yeah, we got 2. So if I was charged for something in Kentucky, I would go to this district court, and then I would go to this Court of Appeals. Do you understand? Cool. We are going on tour of the court system in a few weeks, so please make sure you turn. For those of you who have one, I know 1, 2, 3. I still need 3 more. I still need like 25 more. Who has not had their signed yet? I'm gonna steal things, and then I will copy this after school. So come, or you know what? I wonder if I could scan it and then post it on. Either way, I'll have it to you tonight or tomorrow. Okay? Thank you. Now we're talking about other constitutional courts. There's the International Trade Court. So this is officially a constitutional court that hears anything about trade. And then any special courts, most of the special courts, goes to this Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. So the most cases arise from the U.S. international trade, federal claims, or the Court of Appeals for veteran claims. And then here is my huge list ending this PowerPoint and starting, well, we'll do it again after this, but of all the different special courts, I'm not placing emphasis on this stuff. I want you to know that it exists, but you're not going to have to memorize these courts. There's the U.S. Claims Court, where anyone talks about and claims they have that the federal government did damages to them. The Territorial Court for U.S. territories like Puerto Rico. D.C. has their own courts. Court of Appeal for Armed Forces. Court of Veteran Appeals, and the U.S. Tax Court. All of these are examples of special courts. Remember, special courts have a very small jurisdiction. Questions about that? Any special court has okay.